Radio.
This is Leica Radio.
From the Sky News Centre at 9, the Prime Minister's asked officials to prepare a list of possible measures that could help avoid a second full shutdown of the economy. The Sunday Times is reporting Boris Johnson may impose stricter lockdowns locally in England after a rise in COVID-19 infections. Sandwell in the West Midlands is the latest to appear on the Public Health England's Area of Concern watch list. Brett Packer's a market trader there and says the tightening of restrictions could be the final nail in the coffin.
If we've got a second wave, that really could devastate the whole area. If they lock down Sandwell, Smethwick, people will drive to Birmingham, they'll drive to Maryhill. The regular customers have got to go somewhere to get the produce.
Meanwhile, the Australian state of Victoria has declared a state of disaster after reporting 671 new COVID-19 infections. A night curfew will be in place in Melbourne. A Conservative MP and former minister has been arrested and bailed on suspicion of rape. A number of accusations have been made by a woman who worked in Parliament that are alleged to have taken place over 6 months. A radical shake-up of the planning system in England will be announced in the coming days in an attempt to get homes built faster. The government says the proposals will set out a system that cuts red tape while ensuring communities have a say. Chelsea boss Frank Lampard says he won't let yesterday's FA Cup final defeat define their season. His side were beaten 2-1 by Arsenal during the game at Wembley. And Prince William says he's proud of this season's mental health campaign promoted through the FA Cup. Heads Up, which has been spearheaded by the Duke of Cambridge, has encouraged conversations around men's health.
From top to bottom in football, it's been really well received and picked up on. And we've built on other people's good work and hoping that there's a legacy from this which makes mentally healthy clubs look at themselves and want to aspire to be that much better.
That's the latest. I'm Daryl Jackson.
It's Lidl's Pick of the Week. Save up to 45% on 12 fresh deals. Like barbecue pork kebabs, British rump steak and chicken drumsticks from only $1.29. And baby leaf salad, a pineapple and deluxe British new potatoes from just 49p. All this and more in store now. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes NI.
Talking Points with Keith Faz on Leica Radio 1458 AM. Leica Radio.
Good morning and welcome to Talking Points with me, Keith Vaz. Thank you for joining me today, Sunday the 2nd of August 2020. On this day, Greenwich Mean Time became the law in 1880, and 128 years ago today, the escalator was prototyped. Eid al-Adha Mubarak to all those celebrating Eid this week. And a happy birthday to Deepak Bajaj for tomorrow. Our songs of this week have been chosen by Noreen Usman from Uxbridge, who runs a photographic business with her husband. Good morning, Noreen.
Good morning, Keith.
Tell us your choice of songs. First of all, song number 1. Why have you chosen that song and who's it dedicated to?
First song I've chosen is Bari by Bilal Said. I like this song because it has got a romantic feel to it. It reminds me of Pakistan, and it's just a nice song. I dedicate this song to my husband, Usman, because he's always been there for me.
And your second song is?
My second song is Ghungru Toot Gaye from the film War. This song is just nice. It's got an upbeat feel. It's a remix of a classic, and I dedicate this to my beautiful nieces and nephews. They're too many to name. They love dancing, and I'm missing them so much.
And what's your final song, Noreen?
The final song is Yummy Jalebi, originally by Justin Bieber, but it's got a nice desi twist and remix to it. As it's Eid, I want to dedicate this song to my mum Rubina and my dad Farad, and this song is about jalebi, and Eid is all about eating sweet, so everyone enjoy.
Noreen, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your choice. We're going to enjoy it this Sunday.
Thank you.
In our programme this week, I will be talking to Preet Gill MP for Edgbaston and Shadow International Development Secretary, Britain's first ever woman Sikh MP. We will also be hearing from Jiva Odedra from Scrapped Off about his new book, and Rita Chandarana from Oadby about what it's like to be an eventologist. They may well be awarding PhDs in that very soon. Please stay tuned. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458.
This is Leica Radio.
My special guest today is a history maker. Born in Edgbaston, Birmingham, she now represents the West Midlands constituency in Parliament. Elected only 3 years ago, in 2017, her father Daljit, who sadly passed away, was a bus driver, and her mother Kuldip worked as a seamstress. A local councillor in Sandwell, she graduated with first-class honours from the University of East London. She then became his social worker before arriving at Westminster. She now sits in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet as Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. She is one of only 2 Indian origin women MPs in Labour's top team. She joins me this morning from Birmingham. Good morning, Preet Gill.
Good morning, Keith. Lovely to join you today.
Now, in 2018, you were named as one of Birmingham City University's Brummies Who Inspire. Who inspired you while you were growing up?
Well, I have to say it really was my father. He was very active in the Labour movement. He stood for a councillor, wasn't successful. But, from a very young age, I remember at the age of 15 going out leafleting and campaigning and seeing many politicians in our front room. So actually seeing my father really not just be active politically, but also within the community, because he was the longest standing president of the Guru Nanak Gurdwara Smethwick. And there I saw him not just provide support to community in terms of how we pray, for example, how worship takes place, but actually it became an institution of where he was providing support on welfare basis, on immigration matters. And the thing that really inspired me about my father was in the early 80s, we had lots of women that came over from India that got married to men here, didn't have their families, were quite isolated. And of course, the services that we see today were non-existent back then. And the terms that we see in terms of whether it's domestic abuse and other terms that, the experiences that these women went through were non-existent again in those days. And I remember my father with the committee setting up a small committee of men that when women came to them to access support, they would turn up to these people's houses and want to sit down with their mother-in-law and the husband and sit down and try and find resolution. And of course, that meant actually I had to join my father. So on many occasions he would say, no, you must come with us, because it's so important to have a woman talk to another woman to make sure that actually what the family are telling us is absolutely correct. So seeing my father be so many things to so many people and be so active and progressive was a real inspiration to me.
Now, you took a leap into the election process when you were at Bourneville College, where you stood and was elected as president of the Student Union. Did that experience also whet your appetite for political life?
Yes, that's taking me back some time now. But I think when I took on that role, I saw that there was a real need in terms of bringing our student community together, and that there was lots of things that we could do. And it was quite diverse being in Bourneville at that time. But what you did see, I suppose many will share this experience of in the 90s going to college, many groups were still, very much in silo. So in those kind of very safe pockets of whether it was the African Caribbean community, whether it was the Sikh Indian community, there was a little bit of segregation. And I think that really kind of concerned me. And I wanted to find ways of how we can bring all of that student community together with all its diversity, including those with disabilities, for example. And actually we managed to achieve and make some changes together collectively without anybody really giving us any guidance. And so, I think that was the start of my journey about actually how you can affect change, but you have to bring people with you and you can do so much together.
You then went onto the front line. You became a social worker. So that's taking up a lot of very tough and very challenging problems. What drew you to that career as opposed to any other profession?
Well, I went to university thinking I was going to do sociology and had a kind of plan that I was going to apply for the Whitehall graduate scheme and become a civil servant, and then very quickly realised that actually in London the starting salary for civil servants was very, very difficult to live on. But I was always inherently interested in social work because, as I said, I saw my father really partake in that in an informal way. And then I thought, actually, this is definitely something that interests me and I want to do that. So I then trained to be a social worker in London. And what that enabled me to do as well was it enabled me to travel and work at the same time. I was always interested in the kind of cross-cultural perspectives of how state function and how welfare is provided, for example. So there was something about social justice for me throughout my whole life that I'd seen my father, my mother and those around me become so active, and the late Lord King, as you will remember him, Keith.
Yes.
He was very active in Sandwell. And again, somebody that kind of really inspired me to think about, I'll never forget my father saying, it's all very well you go to university and it's all very well you learn and you want to progress for yourself, but if you give nothing back, what was really the purpose of your life? And that's always stuck with me.
Now, you worked abroad in a kibbutz in Israel with children in India. Do you think those experiences helped you and impacted upon you in your current role as Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. It seems to be always an interest of yours, looking at your early life.
I think so. It's so powerful when you are able to be in a country. You know, when I was Shadow Minister, I went to Uganda, when you can see the impact that development and aid has and how NGOs are working. And as you will know, Keith, in India, it isn't the state that provides provision to its people. It's the non-government organisations that are there, whether it's wash facilities, whether it's safeguarding. Things that we see in the statutory setting here is not the same in many democracies across the world. And I was always inherently interested. And I think my journey in terms of being very fortunate to do my final year of my degree in India, I worked with street children, working with Plan International and UNICEF in the slums of Delhi. It was a real eye-opener for me in terms of being from India as a Sikh woman, sort of really now, you know, thinking about the kind of faith aspect and then looking at the moral aspect of actually why is it that the state is not providing for its people, for example, and trying to make sense of that. So it's quite a life-changing, I would say, moment for me. And when I was there as well, I embarked on the Widows Colony, and we know about 84. And I think that's where my interest around human rights and being fortunate to be in a democracy where you are able to speak up, because that's not the case for many people. And I think, you know, the kibbutz in Israel, again, it was always my interest to think about communal living. And when I went there, it was just wonderful to see Arabs and, you know, Israelis working together. Because of course, there are lots of moderate Israelis that want to have peace and want a two-state solution. And I think it's only when you go there and you really listen to people and you are there, you can experience these things. You can talk from a perspective which is quite your own in a way.
Yes.
And so I think for me, I've enjoyed the opportunity to travel and really learn and listen to those very people. And I think this is something I want to do in this role. Is I'm conscious that sometimes we are far too often setting priorities. We need to be working with those countries and understanding what their priorities are and how development can make a longer term impact.
Sure. We're going to come back to your role after the break. This is Keith Vaz talking to Preet Gill, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development and Britain's first Sikh woman MP.
ਤੈਨੂੰ ਤੱਕਿਆ ਹੋਸ਼ ਹੀ ਭੁੱਲ ਗਈ ਗਰਮ ਗਰਮ ਚਾਹ ਹੱਥ ਤੇ ਡੁੱਲ ਗਈ ਚਾਹ ਸਜਣਾ ਐਸੀ ਤੇਰੀ ਨਿਗਾਹ ਸਜਣਾ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਦੱਸਦੀ ਜਾ ਤੂੰ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਤੇਰੇ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਤੇਰੇ ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਉੱਚੀਆਂ ਦੀਵਾਰਾਂ ਰੱਖੀਆਂ ਨੀ ਤੂੰ ਦਿਲ ਦੇ ਚਾਰ ਚਫੇਰੇ ਨਾਲੇ ਸਾਂਭ ਕੇ ਰੱਖਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਦਿਲ ਚ ਨਾ ਲਾ ਲੈ ਡੇਰੇ ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਦਿਲ ਟੁੱਟਿਆ ਤੇਰਾ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਦਿਲ ਦੀ ਦੀਵਾਰਾਂ ਤੇ ਤੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਨਾ ਬਣਾਈ ਬਾਰੀ चाहे पर मैं डरनी मैं उड़ाते मैं हवावा नाल लड़नी मेरा भी दिल उड़ना चाहे पर मैं डरनी मैं उड़ाते मैं हवावा नाल लड़नी ख्वाब अपने अपनी अखियां बिच संभाले मैं ऐसे लईते दिल ते अपने लाले ताले मैं उच्चियां दीवारां रखियां इस दिल ते चार चफेरे लाले सांभ के रखनियां कोई दिल तेरा लाले डेरे ते मेरा पहला वे दिल टुटिया हाय टुटिया मेरा एक बारी ताइयों दिल दी दीवारां मैं एक न बना ही पारी
This is Leica Leica Radio.
This is Talking Points with Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458 AM.
Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458, talking to Preet Gill, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development and Britain's first female Sikh MP. Preet, you take very seriously your position and your work as chair of the All-Party Group for British Sikhs. Thursday marked 1,000 days since the arrest of the British Sikh activist Jagtar Singh Johal. How much longer do you think it'll take to get him released?
I think realistically, we know that the Indian judicial system takes many, many years for people to get justice. And here is the inherent problem, that it's been 1,000 days since he's been incarcerated and no charges have been levied. And so my concern is that this case is really going to drag on, and we've got to really be working with the Indians to sort of say, if you have the evidence, then we've got to, make sure that the case progresses. And of course, Redress have been working not just on Jagtar's case, but with Nazneen Zaghari-Ratcliffe. We've got to do much more for British nationals who have been incarcerated abroad, and I don't think this government has been doing enough.
Now, I've just reread your maiden speech, and you spoke very passionately about the NHS and mental health. Are you worried about the availability of services, even though the government is spending a lot of money on COVID? Do you think enough is being done for our mental health services?
Unfortunately, I don't think enough has been done. Far too many charities that provide services into mental health, because this is not just about the statutory sector alone, have faced so many cuts. And of course, COVID-19 means lots of difficulties for them because they haven't been able to resume going back into their offices, but they're having to pay those vital rents. And, I spoke to a service this week in my constituency who talked about how, despite the pandemic, all of their staff have been working from home. Nobody has been furloughed because they've been really genuinely concerned about the impact of children not being in school, for example, and they've seen an increase of their referral rates, and they're having to make applications to Lottery Fund and other services. I think that there is so much that's going to come out from this pandemic about the mental health of many people that we have yet to see, and so therefore we've really got to make sure that there is the provision and the support from government.
Obviously taken up a lot of issues in the 3 years you've been in Parliament. We've talked about the British group, the All-Party Group on British Sikhs. We've talked about your role as Shadow Secretary of State. We'll come on to that again shortly. Are there other issues that really interest you that you have been able to raise? It's more difficult when you're on the front bench, of course, but when you first got in, were there other issues of concern to you?
Yes, I think one of the issues that really concerns me, not just when I came in, but now more so, is how invisible social workers have been to government. Given that we've been in lockdown, we've seen actually our statutory services like social care still out there trying to visit families, making sure that safeguarding is paramount. And we've seen that domestic abuse has had some of the most highest referrals since reporting. And now that children are part of that definition, we are going to see a huge surge and increase in referral rates to social care. And I don't think they've been at the forefront of the government's mind. Actually, they have been the invisible voices. I want to know what's been the impact for many of our looked after children who haven't had access to their social worker, for example. We know outcomes haven't improved. When will social work, when will children and families be important to this government?
Now, you also were very involved in the campaign to stay in the EU. Brexit has, of course, happened now. We've come out of the EU, but the 31st of December is one of those iconic days. Do you think we're ready for this? Do you think that the government has a plan? Is the Labour Party signed up to this plan? How do you think it'll go?
Well, I think we're all unclear as to what the government's plan is, because the UK and EU still are some way off in terms of reaching a post-Brexit trade agreement. And as you said, we've left the EU on the 31st of January. So I think the government's got to now fulfil its pledges to the British people in order to protect jobs, secure our food and medical supplies, protecting our citizens' safety and security. So this means building the best possible new relationship for jobs and economy in all parts of the UK, whether that's through tariff and barrier-free trade in goods and services. But it means protecting the security and safety of the people in the UK by, retaining some of our existing cooperation as far as possible. I'm really worried about the West Midlands, for example, because we have a huge manufacturing sector and automotive sector, and the uncertainty for business is really of a real concern.
We're going to take another short break. This is Keith Vaz talking to Preet Gill, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development, Britain's first female Sikh MP.
Leica Radio.
Punjab National Bank International Limited launches mobile app for personal customers. Whether you want to send money to India or view your latest balance, do that on the go. Simply download our app for free from your mobile app store. Terms and conditions apply. For more details, please visit
www.pnbint.com. Deposit protection from FSCS. Authorised by the PRA and regulated by FCA and PRA.
Join PCOjobs.com, the dedicated automated online private hire taxi market.
Advertise your licensed private hire taxi for free or buy, sell, auction, join licensed local operators. Place local vacancies. Get discounted hire and reward insurance, accident management services, MOT or service centres and much more. Expose your product or services directly to pcojobs.com online community.
More music next. If you're an Uber driver, you could be entitled to benefits that you aren't getting. Join the Uber driver's legal claim and you could get £9,000 on average if the claim is successful. But you've got to be in it to win it. Get what you're rightfully owed, because you deserve better. Experienced employment lawyers Lee Day believe Uber drivers deserve better. Sign up now. Text partners to 82727 or visit driversclaim.co.uk to find out more.
Announcing an advertising breakthrough, where your message will reach the nation at the speed of sound. Okay, look, it's radio advertising. And because it's so simple to make, you can write your brilliant ad today and be on air tomorrow. And don't worry, you can still sound fancy. See radio differently at radiocentre.org.
Thousands of people who suffered sexual abuse as children have now been heard.
It was wonderful to be finally listened to.
The Truth Project, part of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, will close in 2021. But for now, we're still here to listen, to hear your experience, and help create a safer future for children. Search Truth Project.
Hello?
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 Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Where are you? Where are you?
I'm here.
My gosh, do you know for only £4 per month you can get the Rocket IO Pro 3D Android smartphone and free earbuds. Get it now, then I'll be able to hear you.
Oh, I heard about the Rocket IO 3D Android smartphone and free earbuds for £2 a month as well. Let's visit eshop.lycamobile.co.uk/radio.
Do it now.
Offer ends 31st of August.
I'll be able to hear you then.
Leica Radio. Talking Points with Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458 AM.
This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458. I'm talking to Preet Gill, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. Preet, you've been in lockdown, of course, with your husband and 2 daughters. What effect has lockdown had on your family?
Well, I think it's been, quite challenging is what I would say, because during the lockdown, of course, I was pointed to the new brief, so making sense of that, but providing support to constituency as well as homeschooling both of our children because they weren't back in school, unfortunately, during this period. So I think, one of the things I want to really see more of is the voices of women and what their experiences have been like during lockdown, because I think far too often we haven't heard their voices during this pandemic. And for me, what I would say is I feel like I haven't switched off, actually. I'm absolutely exhausted. It's from going from Zoom call to Zoom call and not finishing until about at least 6 to 7 every night. And then, of course, you've got to make dinner for your children and they want their mother to be around, spending some time with them. So I think it's been a real challenge. My husband's a key worker as well. He's a children's services manager. So again, in a very difficult role, and not giving our children the time and attention that they need has been probably my biggest concern.
What are their names and how old are they, your 2 kids?
So, yes, I have 2 wonderful daughters. Sukmani is 10 and Sima is 8. And so, they want me to be sort of, spending a bit of time with them. And all they ever say is, Mummy, you're on calls after calls after calls.
Do they understand what you do, or is it going to be when they're in their teens that they're finally going to appreciate the huge demands? It's not just your 2 children and your job as Secretary of State, it's also the 70,000 odd people in your constituency who, look up to you and expect you to do things for them. Do you think they know what you do?
It's interesting. Both of my daughters, were born when I was already in politics. So when I became a councillor, my first daughter, I was pregnant when I was actually campaigning. So they've always known me to be active or having to go to meetings. But it takes time, that adjustment. They don't understand the balance in terms of why am I spending so much more time in terms of, serving the needs of the constituency and the wider brief, for example, as opposed to them. But sometimes when I explain it to them, I think they're so fascinated by the international development brief and what's going on around the world, especially for children. They find that really fascinating and how important it is for Mummy to be doing this role where we can advocate for the world's most poorest.
And tell me about Edgbaston. You were born in Edgbaston. A lot of MPs claim to be born in their constituency when they do their selection meetings, but you actually were. What's so special about your constituency?
Well, yes, I was born in my constituency. I went to school in my constituency. My family live in the constituency. And I've worked in the constituency as a social work manager right at the front line. So understand the demographic needs. It's so diverse, Edgbaston. It's pretty much a microcosm of the country. You know, you have affluence, but you have extreme poverty. Social mobility is a huge concern. But then you have 3 universities. I've got University of Birmingham, Newman University, and part of the BCU campus in my constituency. But many people will know Edgbaston because of the world-famous cricket ground, which hosts some great cricket that I've been able to go to. But yes, I mean, it's such a privilege and an honour to be representing the seat that you've grown up. So when I'm knocking doors and people talk to me about past situations that have occurred or street names or, I'm absolutely able to relate to them. I'm absolutely able to kind of contribute to that conversation. I think it really matters to some people that you do know the area and the place that you are sort of, speaking out for and standing up for. So I think it is really important.
And you held the seat in very, very difficult circumstances with a predecessor who was very much in favour of out of the EU. That was a factor in the recent election. But you held that very marginal seat with a good majority. Were you pleased at the result?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was quite incredible in the 2017 election when every journalist and every person that visited the seat during the campaign were telling me that I was going to lose this seat. And of course, my own self-belief and inherent belief that I was going to be the first Sikh female MP, but also I was going to win this seat. It just kept me going, and the support from the members was just phenomenal. I mean, the campaign, the energy in the campaign, the kind of self-belief, but of course you've got to do the work. And the demographic change in this seat was quite fascinating. I knocked on so many doors, especially of Sikh constituents who could tell me a story about my father, how they knew him or he had helped them. And that was quite fascinating because, as you know, in our community, when, lots of members acquire wealth and have done well in business, they automatically want to then think about, should I vote for Conservative as opposed to Labour? So here was a real opportunity for them to actually elect the first Sikh female MP. And they were quite encouraged to see, actually, we need to be participating in politics in a way that we never have done as a community in the kind of past 100 years.
This is Keith Vaz talking to Preet Gill, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. After I've finished talking to Preet, I will be talking to Rita Chandarani, who's an eventologist, whatever that means, we'll find out, and Jiva Odedra, who's written a book on Hinduism. That's after the break. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458.
से नाची आज ये घुंघरू टूट गए ये घुंघरू टूट गए छोड़ के सारे शर्म और लाज वैसे जोर से नाची आज ये घुंघरू टूट गए ये घुंघरू टूट
Like a Radio.
Like a Radio. Travel update.
I'm Michael Page. The M4 remains closed until tomorrow morning, both ways between Junction 5 for Langley and Junction 6 for Slough and Windsor for the weekend works. In Holborn, the A40 High Holborn remains closed both ways between Chancery Lane Station and the Old Red Lion Pub for a police investigation. In the city, London Wall is closed eastbound between Bloomfield Street and Old Broad Street for emergency repairs, and staying in the city, the A40 Newgate Street is still closed westbound between King Edward Street and Farringdon Street for gas main work. On the trains, London North Western still have no services running between Euston and Hemel Hempstead because of emergency engineering works at Wembley Central, and on the Overground there are no services running between Camden Road and Willesden Junction and between Gospel Oak and Upper Holloway because of overrunning engineering works at Gospel Oak. Engineering work on the tube means there's no District Line services running
Like a Radio.
The Mercedes-Benz A-Class is now available as a plug-in hybrid. It's every bit as exciting as the A-Class you know. Same sporty design, cutting-edge technology and widescreen digital display. But with one big difference. It now has an electric motor for shorter trips and the efficiency of intelligent hybrid driving modes to go even further. That means cheaper running costs than petrol or diesel alone and a lower road tax. Search Mercedes-Benz A-Class plug-in hybrid to find out more.
Like a Radio.
Talking Points with Keith Faz on Like a Radio 1458 AM.
This is Keith Vaz on Like a Radio 1458 talking to Preet Gill, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. The job was created by Tony Blair when he was Prime Minister, and many of the occupants of those jobs have gone on to do even greater things. Many describe it as a dream job. Presumably for you, Preet, it is a dream job, but were you upset when you heard that the government had decided to merge international development with the Foreign Office?
Yeah, firstly, what I would say, Keith, is this is a huge privilege and an honour to be doing what is a life-changing brief. And I, don't want to see us in Labour having a huge turnover of shadow secretaries of state, because we've seen that even with the government. And I think in a brief like this, you've really got to stay for the longer term in terms of really making a difference. But of course, learning to build relationships with the sector, understanding what the issues are. So of course, we were really hugely concerned about the takeover. It was announced before the integrated review had an opportunity for consultation to take place. And of course, the government's made this decision without any consultation, without any detail. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, why would you undertake a Whitehall reshuffle of a world-renowned department in the midst of a global pandemic, when actually we should be leading the charge and building kind of global collaboration and cooperation? No one is supporting spending £50 million of taxpayers' money reshuffling this Whitehall department, which is, as the Institute for Government said, will take 2 years. 2 years to bed in. All the while, we need to be absolutely making sure we are supporting the world's poorest to address the pandemic.
We have invited Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, on the programme. We hope he can join us later in the month to talk about why he's made that move. Preet, in 1970, the UN set a target for aid spending of 0.7% of a country's GDP, which the UK has met every year since 2013, so under both Labour and Conservative governments. Are you concerned that because of what's happening to our economy, we might have to cut that international aid?
Well, look, I think we know that there's an estimated fall of about, in terms of GDP, about 9%. And that's according to the latest sort of OBR research and the Treasury documents on external estimates. But I think it's really important. Removing projects from the UK's ODA spend would have actually been enough to cover the reduction in GNI. So this idea that just before the summer recess, in a letter, the government announced that there's going to be up to £3 billion of cut. And that's cutting the aid budget by 20%. So the question we have to ask ourselves, is the government hiding something and the national picture is going to be substantially worse? Or are they actually using this as an excuse to cut more than they need so they can still meet their manifesto commitment of 0.7 by funneling money to prop up other government departments, which, as you know, 30% of ODA money is being spent by them. But of course, it's lacking in transparency or effective use of the aid budget. And what we are saying is let's reevaluate and let's repurpose that money that has very little to no development impact.
Your brief means dealing with real human emotions and some intractable problems, like, for example, Yemen and Syria. At the moment, those countries in particular, though there are of course many, many others, are going through a dreadful humanitarian crisis that is unimaginable for people in our country. What can British citizens do, and what can you do in your role to make sure you can help the Yemeni or the Syrian people?
I think, we've all seen that Yemen's the worst world humanitarian crisis, and it's really heart-wrenching to see some of the reports. I mean, the very fact that a third of the Yemeni population doesn't have access to healthcare facilities during this pandemic is really concerning. I mean, we've all seen, despite having the NHS, we've seen the death toll really high and increasing at 65,000. And so many countries can't actually invest in their own healthcare facilities. They don't have access to those healthcare facilities. How do we suppose that they are going to keep themselves safe? I think this is an opportunity to create global solidarity between the British public, who are absolutely fully behind, the development agenda and the impact that actually aid can have. And so we've seen those commitments, but I think, as Mark Lowcock says, some of that money just isn't getting to those places fast enough. And that's a real concern. I think we need to be absolutely thinking about what the G20 can do more together collectively to make sure that, aid and vital PPE equipment, medical tools are going to be available to those very people. And I suppose this is one of the things that we've been calling for, is that when there is a vaccine available, it's got to be equitable, it's got to be mass manufactured, it's got to be distributed, and it's got to be available to everyone. And this requires global cooperation and collaboration. We are seeing a rise of anti-globalists in the world, and we've really got to be making the case. I want to see Britain lead on these issues, and unfortunately we've seen a government that's in retreat.
You've made it to Westminster. It's tough for women in politics. It's very, very tough to get into Parliament in any event. What's your message to any young Preet Gill who wants to also follow in your footsteps? What should they do?
I would say, don't be deterred. Just really go for it, but sit down and really write down what it is that you want to do. Find a mentor, someone that's done it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Get somebody to support you. Understand what the process is, because this is the biggest issue. Is sometimes we have a dream and aspiration to do something, but we don't actually always understand the process by which we can achieve that. I think that's a really fundamental learning lesson. I would say get active in different ways. Locally, you can be a campaigner. You don't always have to stand for office. It might be something that you want to do, but there are different ways that we can absolutely bring about change in our community. So I would say dream big and just go for it, and don't let anyone put you off your dream.
Preet Gill, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this morning. Thank you for joining us on Leica Radio 1458, and keep breaking those glass ceilings.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's been an absolute pleasure to have joined you today.
Leica Radio.
Yeah, you got that. You got what I want, it's Sony, yeah. Mithi galan karke tu na ja gori, yeah. Hey, I think about it every day. Baby looking like Hana Kazana on a plate. Hey, like mithai, like kulfi, rasmalai. Hey, pista barfi, sardiyan vich garmi lagdi. Jad vi tu mere raah vichon chaldi. Bonafide, stallion. You need no stable, no, you stay on the run. Ain't on the side. Number one, yeah, every time I come around, you get it done. 50 love the way you split it. 100 racks on me, spin it, babe. Light a match, get lit it, babe. Like jet set, watch the sunset, kinda. Yeah. Rolling eyes back in my head, make my toes curl, yeah. Yeah, you got that. Yeah, you got that yummy, 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 yummy. Yeah,
lies. Lost control of myself, I'm compromised. You're incriminating, no disguise. And you ain't never running low on supplies. Can't you love the way you split it? Gonna rest, I'm spinning, babe. Got a masculinity, babe. Jet set, watch the sunset come. Yeah, yeah. All the night back in my head, make my toes curl, yeah, yeah.
Hey, baby, let me see it. I just wanna eat it. Baby, let me see it. No, I really need it. Oh, baby, let me see it. I just wanna eat it.
The unsung came from near and far. The cleaners who wipe away our worries. Friendly bank tellers and smiley delivery drivers. Here's to the healthcare workers who we'd hug if we could. We all hail the bus drivers and salute our frontliners. Local heroes, one and all. We're not an island. We are part of something far, far bigger. HSBC UK. Together, we thrive.
At Big Motoring World, we usually say go big or go home. But now we're saying go big from your home. Order the car you love from the thousands online and then collect in store. Contact-free digital signing, sanitized cars, and a whole lot of loving from 2 meters. Big Motoring love has never been so clean. Order online at bigmotoringworld.co.uk.
Big Motoring World. Pakistan is calling. The mobile plan you've been waiting for has arrived. You can now get 1,000 minutes to call Pakistan from your Leica Mobile with Pakistan Plus M bundle. You can also get 3 GB of data and 1,000 minutes and text in the UK. All of that for the low price of £20 for 30 days. Never miss the chance to keep in touch with your family again with Leica Mobile. Visit leicamobile.co.uk to see the full offer today. T&Cs apply. Leica Mobile.
For investing in gold and other precious metals, buy with confidence from Wasim Jewelers. Call today for more information. Southall's Wasim Jewelers, 020-8571-1193.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Lockdown is finishing and businesses are reopening now. During lockdown, people started to listen to radio more. Radio is the best way to let your customers know that you are open again. To win customers back is challenging, but radio can help. Call Leica Media sales team on 0207 132 1458 to make your customers aware that you are open again.
This is
Leica Radio.
This is Talking Points with Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458 AM.
Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio 1458. During my interview with Preet Gill, she mentioned her views on the government's decision to put the Department of International Development into the Foreign Office. This is the government's decision, and I'm quoting from the Prime Minister. This is exactly the moment when we must mobilise every one of our national assets, including our aid budget and expertise, to safeguard British interests and values overseas. And the best possible instrument for doing that will be a new department charged with using all the tools of British influence to seize the opportunities ahead. That was Boris Johnson in respect of the decision to merge the two departments. Now, COVID and the lockdown has caused a serious effect on the UK events industry. Let's talk to Rita Chandarana, who runs a company called Eventologists, which specialises in funky events, planning, decor and theming, and she runs it with her husband, and they have done so for the last 16 years. Amongst their blue chip clients are Wagamama and Samsung. Rita joins me this morning. Good morning, Rita.
Good morning, Keith.
Now, you've got quite a few businesses that you run with different aspects. How has COVID affected the events industry?
Wow, for us, every business that I run is in the events industry. So I think it was around February time, and I started to notice that COVID was starting to affect us because we had a massive cancellation by Nestle, who were our first client. And then very soon after, we were doing some installations for Wagamama at the time, and in fact, the cherry blossom decoration was done on the almost the very last day before they locked down. And unfortunately, the beautiful decoration that you saw on the Times newspaper wasn't used by them because all the restaurants closed down. And it's very unfortunate because we're in a situation where we're not quite sure when our industry is going to bounce back, because obviously large gatherings are not allowed at the moment. And as of the events industry, we don't quite fit in hospitality. So the support for the events industry has been particularly poor. So a lot of people have struggled during this time.
Now, generally on the issue of events and themes, obviously we all hope you get back to 100% of the work that you all are doing. But say you had a client who had a particular idea and a theme that they wanted for a wedding or a birthday party, and you knew that this was the wrong theme and you had a better idea, obviously with your 16 years of experience. How do you convince your client that they're wrong and that they should adopt your theme and what you think should be there?
Wow, that's a really tricky question. I guess we do need to acknowledge some of their ideas and really need to understand where their thinking of the theme actually and their idea comes from. And perhaps maybe give them suggestions to say, well, how about this? We either, because the theme exists and their budget doesn't allow them to do something that is completely bespoke, or if the idea, I have to say, I've never had an idea that has been completely off the wall, but when they do come up with ideas that we just don't feel are workable, we have to really work on the trust side and then try and get them to understand that, okay, we can still run with this element, but what about doing it like this, because we've done it before. We have some very sort of odd, especially at Halloween time, we have some very scary and odd requests that people like. And obviously Halloween's perfect for doing some crazy things. But the rest of the time, we will look at their audience, look at them, and then really get them to understand that we are eventologists. So we just know, this is the best way to help you. And 99% of the time, they usually go with a blend of our ideas and their ideas.
Finally, you have got a new project which you have launched as a result of COVID. Could you tell us what that project is?
Wow, yes, very exciting, because in the last few days, myself and my family have launched a photo face mask company. And it really kind of started with the fact that I was walking around and family were walking around with almost these very horrific sort of bandages that I would describe them as. And, if you ever met me, you will see that I have the biggest smiley face and I never take that off. And actually, not even my eyes could smile as big as my face. So we decided that it wouldn't be lovely to launch a photo mask company that would allow hospitality, the events industry, and all these customer service related industries to wear masks that resembled their face. So when people do approach them, whether it's in a shop or a retail or a restaurant or a cafe, that big smile would make people actually smile back instead of feeling a little bit worried about attending or visiting these spaces. And obviously the economy needs that boost, doesn't it?
Sure. Well, I can't wait to go to the eventologist's masked ball with one of your masks. In the meantime, I'm going to put one of them on and stick it on the Talking Points Instagram account. And let's see the reaction of my fellow presenters on Talking Points. Rita, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm sure we're going to talk to you again in the future, and we hope that the business will start booming yet again for you.
Thank you, Keith, and have a lovely Sunday.
This is Leica Radio.
Finally, we have a new book on the market called Know Yourself, The Values from the Bhagavad Gita. It's written by Dr. Jiva Odedra, the Chief Executive Officer of Jalaram's Farsans, and also chair of a major Hindu temple. He's now written his second book. Good morning, Jiva.
Good morning, Keith.
Jiva, why did you decide to write this book? And what is this book about?
I decided to write this book because there are pockets of communities where one group is saying to another group, living with you is not an option, dialogue with you is not an option. If you're faced with that situation, if you're an individual in this environment, what do you do? And rather than going into examples, I started looking, is this first time happening, or has it happened previously in humanity's journey? And I found in Bhagavad Gita, essentially there was a family split took place, and one group of family members turned to other group and said, look, your existence is not acceptable to us. We're not prepared to share anything with you. Just evaporate. And in that situation, and Lord Krishna was in the middle of it. So this book is about temperament. People go through different temperaments. In Bhagavad Gita, people talk about 3 different temperaments, Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. Basically, if you've got Tamasic temperament, you're more or less lazy or inertia in your outlook and your behavior and what you do. Things like critical, lustful, you're confused, you're lazy, procrastinate, all those. If you're of Sattvic temperament, on the other hand, there is an element of humility, joyful, take yourself as a balanced person, and there is a community care and so on, self-control generally.
What are the core teachings of the Bhagavad Gita?
Core teachings of Bhagavad Gita can be summed up in 3 words: action, knowledge, and devotion. I will slightly explain to you. Action is, Lord Krishna is basically saying, you have right to perform duties. And duties you perform all the time. You can't even get out of bed if you don't perform duties. So, selfless action. You have right to perform, but you have no right to the results. Knowledge is know your place in the grand scheme of things. How you relate to the world around you. And the third one is how do you go about? You need to maintain element of devotion to this grand scheme. So it's about karma, jnana, bhakti, or knowledge, devotion, and action.
And finally, Jiva, how are the teachings of Krishna relevant today for communities in the United Kingdom?
Especially for United Kingdom, we are a beautiful community in terms of our heritage and so on, how we go about addressing issues. And Krishna is relevant because Krishna is all about action. Krishna doesn't give any remedies or solutions. He just says, do the right thing, stand up where you are, know your place in the grand scheme of things, in our case is United Kingdom, and be participant. Don't be passive. Take charge. Cooperate with others and be devoted to your cause, and make sure whatever you do it with wholeheartedness, without any expectations for things to turn around your way. That's the key.
Sure. Well, I'm sure that's going to make very interesting reading for our summer holidays. We shall put that on the summer holiday reading list. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Jiva, and the best of luck for the book.
Thank you, Kate, for the wishes, and thank you for having me on this program.
Leica Radio.
You can increase your chances of passing your driving test by taking driving lessons and a mock driving test arranged by mockdrivingtest.com. They will support you through all stages of getting a driving licence. So if you're a student looking for quick success or an ADI looking for more business, then log on to mockdrivingtest.com now.
New phone? Great! Because now you can turn your old one into cash in just 3 easy steps. Visit LeicaInsure.com/radio to find out more. Leica Insure services are supplied by Mobiles and Gadgets, a trading name of Quote Me Today. QMT is authorised and regulated by the Finance Conduct Authority, 786619.
Hi, sorry, I wonder if you could help me.
Well, I'll try.
If I give you this £10 note, can you please promise me that you'll put it to a good cause?
Yeah, sure, of course I will.
Great, thanks very much. In fact, let's make it 20. Here you go.
No worries, I'll take care of it. See ya.
You wouldn't give your money to just anyone this Eid al-Adha, so why give it to a charity you're not even sure is registered? Don't let COVID-19 get in the way of giving Kobani. Visit gov.uk/check charity to ensure your donation always reaches the right people.
Punjab National Bank International Limited launches mobile app for personal customers. Whether you want to send money to India or view your latest balance, do that on the go. Simply download our app for free from your mobile app store. Terms and conditions apply. For more details, please visit
www.pnbint.com. Deposit protection from FSCS. Authorised by the PRA and regulated by FCA and PRA.
Lockdown is finishing and businesses are reopening now. During lockdown, people started to listen to radio more. Radio is the best way to let your customers know that you are open again. To win customers back is challenging, but radio can help. Call Leica Media sales team on 0207 132 1458 to make your customers aware that you are open again.
Leica Radio.
Talking Points with Keith Faz on Leica Radio 1458 AM.
That's it for this week. Time's up. Please stay tuned for Sonia, who will be hosting an exciting edition of Bollywood Hits after the news. My thanks to my guests Preet Gill MP, Jiva Odedra, Rita Chandarana and Noreen Usman for choosing our songs. As usual, respect to the Leica team, station manager Sunil, producer Rupi and my editor Adam. This has been Keith Faz on Talking Points, Leica Radio 1458. Thank you for tuning in. I know that you have a choice, so thank you for spending a bit of your Sunday morning with me. I'm signing off this week with Mark Morrison's Return of the Mac. Although he was born in Hanover, he went to school in Rushmead in Leicester, and this song has got nothing to do with a certain fast food company. Stay safe and have a great Sunday.
Leica Radio.
Story goes, baby, now I got the flow, 'cause I know it from the start. Baby, when you broke my heart, that I had to come again and show you that I'd win. Your love to mine. All those times I said that I loved you. Your love to mine. Yes, I tried. Yes, I tried. Your love to mine. Even though you knew I'd die for you. Your love to mine. Yes, I cried. Yes, I cried. Return of the man. Return of the man. Come on. Return of the man. Oh my God. Return of the man. Here I am. Return of the man. Once again. Return of the man. Top of the world. Return of the man. Watch my flow. Return of the man. Here I go. So I'm back up in the day. Running thanks to take my swine. Letting all the people know that I'm back to run the show. 'Cause what you didn't know was wrong. And all the nasty things you've done. So baby, listen carefully while I sing my comeback song. Your love to mine. She said she'd never turn on me. Your love to mine. But you did. But you did. Your love to mine. All this pain you said I'd never be. Your love to mine. But I do. Return of the man. Return of the man. Oh, return of the man. Don't you know? Here I go. Return of the man. A little girl. Return of the man. Once more pearl. Return of the man. Up and down. Round and round.
Stop lying about your big break. For God's sake, I need a real man.
The return of the man.
Stop letting me down. Stop letting me down.
Your love to mine. She said she'd never turn on me. Your love to mine. But you did. Your love to mine. All this pain you said I'd never be. Your love to mine. But I do. Return.
On 1458 in London.
On your mobile.
And on DAB Digital Radio.
This is Leica Radio.